Welcome to today's session. It's great to see so many people joining me for these sessions. We've been running them for 2 months now, and they're becoming more and more popular. Seems like the topics that we are running create quite a bit of interest in the profession. So today we'll be talking about digital risk. My name is Mario Bozilov, and I'll be your host for today. I have been involved with risk and audit for close to 30 years. My background is in data analytics and audit, and I have also dealt with various types of digital risk and how to analyze them and how to audit them. So today I would like to share some of the things that I have encountered in my working life, and hopefully they'll give you some ideas where to start and how to approach digital risk. So first, before we continue and start talking about digital risk specifically, I would like to clarify some things and provide some definitions, because there seems to be a little bit of confusion when we start discussing these topics. So first, digitization. And digitization is the process of changing from analog to digital form. Think about a paper invoice. When you scan it and when you put it into your document management system, this is what digitization is. So we took something which is in analog form, a document written on a piece of paper, we scanned it, we converted it into a digital form, we put it as a record in some system, can be document management system, can be something else, and then we can access it at any point in time much easier. We can also share the access to that document across many people in the organization. So this is what digitization is. So we're just talking something that exists in digital form and converting it into a digital form. Another example from our personal lives is actually taking the old photos that we may have and scanning them and loading them into our computers. Again, this is a conversion analog form, the actual photo on a paper, on a photo paper, and now we have access to it, and we can watch it on our mobile phones, on our computers, laptops, TVs, and so on. The next stage, which is a little bit more advanced, is digitalization. And digitalization, according to the definition by Gartner, is the use of digital technology to change a business model and provide new revenue and value-producing opportunities. And it is a process of moving to digital business. Now, when we digitize the information, we haven't got a digital business yet. We simply converted things from analog into digital, but we still cannot use them very well. Now, digitalization, just to give you an example, is when we take those records, and now we take the information from a vendor invoice that has been digitalized, and now we can actually start querying what is happening with that invoice. So we have 10 invoices from a vendor which have been digitized, convert from paper to digital form, but we cannot answer a simple question: how much did we spend with that vendor in Q1 of 2021? Because we have the invoices as pictures, so they're in digital form, but we are not actually using the information which is on those invoices yet. We actually need to manually go and write now the number from invoice 1, invoice 2, invoice 3, or put it into Excel and calculate the total. The actual digitalization means that now we, in addition to having the digital record, we also have digital information. So now, once we put all of these invoices from the vendor into some sort of a system, we can answer a simple question: how much did we spend with vendor A in Q4 2021, and the answer may be 50,000 ringgit. How much did we spend with vendor B in Q4 of 2021, and the answer can be 20,000 ringgit. So now it's much easier, because if we have 50 invoices from a vendor, and usually it's much more, until we actually digitalize those invoices and have access to the information on them, we cannot do much with them. Manually calculating that is really not very efficient. So this is what digitalization is now. We are having those value producing opportunities. We can now start looking deeper into questions: who is our top vendor? Who is our second top vendor that we are spending a lot of money with? Which 5 vendors we never actually ordered anything from them, and should we keep them in our vendor master file? These are the things. Difficult to answer all of these questions if you have just one big box of paper invoices or one set of pictures. That's not good. From those invoices, you actually need to access the information. This is what digitalization is. Now we're moving to the digital risk management. So according to McKinsey, digital risk management is a term that looks at all of the digital enablements, all of the digital improvements that improve the risk effectiveness and efficiency. Things are here like process automation, decision automation, because we're much more consistent when we automate decision, and digitized monitoring and early warning. And again, digital risk management is saying that it's a concerted adjustment of process, data analytics, and IT. As you can see, there's a lot of components to digital risk management, including things which people don't usually link that immediately or that quickly with digital, including people, talent, and culture. We actually need to have people who are interested, who are keen to appreciate what digital risk is, and actually start working on mitigating them. Now, just a quick poll, and please use the chat box. Just enter a number between 1 and 6. What is which of those 6 options is the biggest risk that your organization is facing? 1, new technologies like big data, Internet of Things, or artificial intelligence. Number 2, cybersecurity. Number 3, privacy. Number 4, social media, digital disruption. Number 5, and number 6, identity fraud. Just quickly to get an idea where we are in terms of digital risk priorities. Okay, well, thanks for your answers. It seems like cybersecurity is #1 concern currently in most places. I think that's understandable, and especially with a lot of people working from home over the last couple of years as a result of the COVID lockdowns, and some people are still working from home. I think it is good to see that cybersecurity is becoming top of mind for a lot of organizations, because our industry, the risk industry and audit industry, we've been talking about these things for a very long time, but only now we can actually see the reply from the organization. That actually, these answers are quite consistent around the world. I do run these sessions regularly, and it seems to me that cybersecurity is always top of mind. So let's move on now. So when we talk about digital risks, I would like to make a very clear distinction in terms of external versus internal digital risks. I think that people sometimes don't appreciate what the situation is, because the risks that you are facing internally actually are much, much higher than some of the risks that you are facing externally. And think about this castle here. So the castle has got those big walls and towers to protect it, and actually to breach the defense of the castle will take a lot of effort, will take a lot of resource, people, technology, and so on and so on. But there is enough if there is one person inside the castle to open one of the doors at night, and then the castle will fall. So actually the internal risks for any organization are much, much higher. And this is what we need to keep in mind when we think about the external and the internal risks. External definitely need to be taken care of, but they are not the only ones. And we'll talk a little bit more shortly about these things. So some of the internal risks and some of the risks, and I'll go through the internal ones in a little bit more detail in a second. But digital disruption risks. Now, think about it this way. So with digital disruption risks, now, suddenly a lot of companies, small and medium, have got the resource and the knowledge to actually challenge the big ones. And we'll see that in a second. So it's not just the system risk, these are the risks to the whole business model. These are the risks to the existence of the company. I'm not sure about Southeast Asia, because 10 or 15 years ago, I haven't been to Southeast Asia. I've been traveling excessively in the 3 years before COVID, since 2017 to 2019. I'm not sure what the situation is, but in Australia, there was a chain called Blockbuster, video rental. That chain is nowhere to be seen. There used to be a store, one of those, close to where I live, in a little shopping center about a kilometer away. He hasn't been there for at least 10 years. I used to go there with my wife, and we used to rent videos. No need, because now we have Netflix. So when we talk about risks, this is a huge risk. It's not just a system, it's not just the data, it's basically a risk to the whole business. The whole business disappeared simply because it's much easier to rent a video from Amazon or from Netflix or from Disney or wherever. So now why would you go to the local store? You don't need to. Maybe there are little stores catering for people with some nostalgic feelings, but most of us don't go to a video store. That's it. We don't, probably 99.9% of the people don't even have the technology to be able to run video cassette. And how many people still keep DVD players? We haven't had one for 6 or 7 years. So digital disruption is a really big issue. Online credit application risks. Now, if you are a financial services organization, you don't need to be a financial services organization if you're providing financial services, and I'll talk about that in a second. Again, those things, some credit applications, so no matter whether it's a credit application, it can be application for anything which involves personal information and issuing some sort of a card, whether it's a credit card, whether it's a membership card, doesn't matter. Now, there's a risk there simply because people can present themselves as something else, somebody that they are not. So suddenly we have a different set of risks here. Fraud and identity theft risk. Okay, identity theft is a big problem in financial services organization. But it's not just there, it is also it's becoming a big problem in government services, simply because once you manage to present yourself as somebody else, and to get documents issued to that person, together with their identifying numbers, they can then start applying for credit in banking and so on and so on. So suddenly, theft in one industry or in one area, identity theft in one area, can very easily jump into other areas. And this is very well enabled by technology, simply because now the mechanism exists for people to automate identity theft. Actually, there is software you can buy quite cheaply, which can actually generate hundreds of identities per month. Per day, that you can submit to different places. I know of a site, because this is what my PhD research is, identity theft. I can go to a site and I can say, I want you to give me an identity, male, between 35 and 45, and it will give me 5. And then I can say, I want a female one. It will give me 5 together with social security numbers, with email addresses, with street addresses, with names, everything. And now I can go and start using these identities, false identities, which don't exist, and start applying for various documents. Cloud-related risk. A lot of organizations are now moving their infrastructure into the cloud, simply because it makes economic sense to actually outsource some of the things that they've been doing. So if you are not in the business of running IT services, if you don't need the expertise, why do you need to hire a team of IT specialists when you actually can outsource your infrastructure to Microsoft or Amazon or Google, or maybe some of the second-tier providers? But that brings a set of risks that we'll be discussing in a little bit more detail in a second. Data governance and privacy risk. There is a lot of privacy legislation around the world. One of the strictest ones is GDPR. It comes from the European Union. Pretty hefty fines, and organizations need to deal with it, whether they are in Europe or not, because any organization that actually has data of European citizens needs to take care of that data the way GDPR relates. In Malaysia, there is the personal data privacy, and most countries around the world have got a legislation dealing with privacy. So now we need, as an organization, we need to keep that into account and actually manage that risk as well. Compliance risks, depending on the industry, there's various types of compliance that need compliance legislation that organizations need to deal with. And those compliance risks are usually very closely linked to systems, because quite often organizations have automated those processes which fall under the compliance. But how do you know that the systems which are used to automate the process are operating all the time? They need to be reviewed as well. Business resilience risk. What happens if tomorrow your data center is flooded? It happened here in Brisbane about 11 years ago. So suddenly, Brisbane city, about 30% of it was flooded, and there were organizations whose data center was flooded because it was in the basement of their building, and that basement was underwater. Some of them didn't have a problem because they had a different data center. They actually dealt with it. They had been able to deal with it. What happens if tomorrow your office is closed? Like, okay, we're used to lockdowns and things like that. But at the beginning of the lockdowns, it happened to me personally. I had to go and deliver some training at a venue. And so certainly it was an online session. And suddenly I rolled up there and the venue was closed. Nobody told me because they closed it the day before. I didn't have an email. I'm there to run a session. And suddenly I don't know what is happening. I managed to sort it out But these are the types of things in terms of business resiliency that organizations need to be able to deal with. Dynamic workforce risk, and this is very closely linked to cybersecurity, and we'll discuss that in a second, because we now have our workforce is not in the office 100% of the time anymore. Before COVID, very few organizations in Australia, speaking to clients in Malaysia, when I was going to Malaysia quite often, I didn't know in Malaysia many people who were working remotely or from home. I didn't know many people in Australia, for that matter, who were working remotely. Now in Australia, that's one of the competitive advantages for some companies. They say, we'll pay you that much, which is the same as our competitor. However, when you come to us, you can work from home 5 days a week. And that's a big deal for some people. So now we have a workforce that sits, some of it is at home, some of it is in the office, some of it moves between home and office. So that needs to be taken into account. As I said, it's very closely linked to cybersecurity, and we'll talk about that in a second, and the cybersecurity risks themselves that we mentioned: passwords, authentication, phishing, fraud, and so on and so on. Now, excuse me, looking at the internal environment, we have operating systems which actually run, they sit on the computers that we have in the data. Talking about the data centers here, the corporate systems. So there are various operating systems which run the environment. Those operating systems have got a number of databases that are sitting on top of this. They're inside the operating system. And these databases themselves run different types of applications that the organization is using. It can be the customer relationship management system, it can be the finance management system, it can be the vendor management system, payroll system, HR system, and so on and so on. Some of these databases actually feed more than one system, like what you see here on the left side. The database actually goes into 2 applications. Some of them just go and feed one. But the thing is that all of the information that we need to protect is sitting in those databases. And it is accessed by us through the application. Now, these operating systems actually relate to individual servers that we have in our data set. But those servers are also linked together because everything's networked. It makes sense, it's much easier to maintain. It provides a lot of benefits in terms of management, in terms of economics, and so on and so on. So our servers running the operating systems are networked, all right? And then to finish all that, we have our networks connected to the internet, that cloud on the right. So now we have this environment, we have risks across each one of these separate parts of the environment. We have operating system risks, we have database risks, we have application risks, we have network risks, and then we have the risks which are there because of being linked to the internet. So all of these are there, and we need to account for them. Some organizations are really good. They do have IS audit teams, information systems audit team. I'm an information systems auditor myself. This is how my audit career started before I moved to general audit. So they do have that, but small organizations usually don't. So now, small organizations, if you are working for one of those, if you don't have an IS audit team, you just need to keep that in mind, that these are the risks. Now, that expertise is accessible. Even if you don't have an in-house team, you can always get contractors, you can hire people temporarily, and so on and so on. So it's not like it's not possible to be solved. You just need to be aware that this is what needs to happen. And these are the things that you need to deal with. So just some examples quickly. So operating systems. For each of the operating systems that your organization is running, for the server systems, I mean, there are configuration risks. There is a capacity risk. Do we have enough resources on that server? If we have our payroll system, which requires to have let's say, 2 gigabytes of free space because it does some processing, and it needs some free space on the hard disk, and then need to be freed to use it, and then freed. If we have 1 gigabyte potentially, that system can stop working during a payroll run, potentially. So now, what does that mean from a purely business perspective? That means that the organization hasn't been able to pay the employees on the normal payment date. I'm pretty sure that that would create a lot of issues with employees, with trade unions if they are present, but even with individual employees, senior managers will be unhappy. So these are all the things that we need to consider for competitors. Just, it tells you what it does. Life cycle risks. Now, when we get rid of that server after 5 years or after 4 years, whatever the life cycle of the server is, how do we dispose of it? Okay. Now we cannot just go and sell it on eBay or to an external provider who will sell it to eBay properly. Because we need to make sure that all of the information was deleted from that system before it was disposed. This is part of the life cycle. We need to be able to do it. That's the end of life cycle treatment. There was a case 5 or 6 years ago when a health insurance organization sold their intelligent printers, like those big printers that can scan, then they can copy, they can print. They sold them on eBay. Now, what people didn't realize at the time is that each one of these printers actually is a computer. It's got a hard disk to actually store the print jobs. It's got its own process. It's got its own memory. So actually, after a while, I don't know whether the organization directly put them on eBay or they sold them to a computer recycler who put them on eBay. Those things ended up on eBay with hard disks full of information, personal information, all of the people who actually have policies with the health insurers, and whose information was printed on that specific printer for some reason. So all of that information was available on eBay. So we need to keep in mind all of these things that can potentially have upgrades and patching. There are viruses, there are issues all the time. So now we need to keep our systems up to date. Is there a process for that? In most organizations, if there's a dedicated team, there is. If there isn't, now that becomes a little bit of a different situation. But our systems need to be upgraded and patched according to the recommendation from the vendor. Otherwise, the vendor cannot take responsibility for the performance of that system. Backups. Are we backing up our system? Now, 99% of the organizations do back up their systems. Now, what is much more difficult or much less known, is are these backups working? If tomorrow that system disappears up in a cloud of smoke and you need to buy a new one, exactly the same, and then restore from the backups, would you be able to do that? Have the backups been tested ever? It's a very expensive process, takes time, it's all of that. So organizations cannot do it on a weekly basis, but probably at some large period of time, maybe yearly, maybe every couple of years, backups need to be tested. There needs to be something which will tell us that this risk of not working backups has been managed in some way. Networks is another one. Internal risks, password sniffing. There can be a little piece of software that somebody can install and on a network that actually can start recording passwords. So now somebody sitting next to me, if the network is not configured properly, can install a little piece of software that actually can sniff my password when I'm logging in. Not only my password for the login, it can actually sniff my passwords for the internet banking if I do some quick internet banking at some point in time during work hours. Elevated privileges. Should I be able to access everything? The answer is no for most of us. People just need to access what they actually need for their work. However, when somebody used to work in procurement and then they moved into finance, in an ideal world, their privileges, what they could access as a procurement employee, should be removed, and a new set of privileges should be given to them as a finance employee. Quite often, this is not happening. The new privileges are given because the employee will request them, and they know, and the IT department will give it to them, but the other ones are not removed. So suddenly, after, instead of having two sets of privileges, one here, they have this one, okay? And after they've changed 3 or 4 jobs, 3 or 4 positions, sorry, in the organization, suddenly they have a lot of privileges which are not needed because they shouldn't be having them, because they actually left those departments quite some time ago. Access to corporate information. There's some really sensitive information on the networks in terms of documents which are supposed to be seen only by a limited number of people, databases which shouldn't be accessible. Now, somebody who's got database expertise, like for example, I used to work as a database designer. If I need to get access to information in a system, I don't need the front end. If I have access to the database, I can get absolutely everything that I want to. Because if you remember the picture before, for each application, payroll, customer relationship management, sales, whatever, there's a database. I don't need the front end. I know exactly how to extract information from the database. That used to be my job. So now we need to make sure this is a very limited number of employees who can do that, but nevertheless, we need to be aware that these people exist, and we need to restrict access to database and to sensitive information for everybody pretty much, except for the people who need to use it. Externally, there is a lot of risks that an organization needs to deal with. One of those risks, advanced persistent threats. These are actually risks when the organization is targeted. These are high-value organizations. Like if we put it in Malaysian context, they can be something like Bank Negara or Maybank. Somebody is spending a lot of time. They are not targeting everybody. They're targeting just one person. Somebody is spending a lot of time developing a mechanism to attack this organization simply because the target is a very high value. It happened 50 or 10 or 12 years ago, I think, to the Iranian nuclear power stations. Somebody actually hacked into their software and caused some damage. It was a high value target considered by somebody. Nobody knows who did that. There are some guesses, but the people who actually executed that, they spent about 6 months targeting just one place. So these things are something that we need to keep into account as well. If we work for an organization that potentially is a high value, we need actually to put some extra protection there. Social media is another one which people don't usually consider as a risk, but it is definitely a digital risk that organizations need to be aware of. Now, number one is reputation, okay? Now, whatever appears on social media directly reflects the reputation of the company. So on the company's webpage, on the company's Facebook page or Instagram account or Twitter account or LinkedIn or wherever, all of the posts need to be managed by someone and need to be approved by someone. Otherwise, people actually can impact the reputation quite negatively. It is also a potential for security breach because somebody actually can masquerade as a brand. Does happen quite a lot in emails, but it's also happening online, the so-called phishing. It looks like the website of a reputable bank, but it's not. So people start clicking, they start entering information. Not everybody knows, and not everybody pays as much attention. Same with social engineering. People are just trying to get information about our organization or information from some of the employees in the organization through social media. Regulatory and compliance. If you are in a highly driven compliance industry, whatever appears on social media is basically something that the organization needs to communicate to the public. Whatever appears there needs to follow the compliance guidelines, because the organization can be fined, can be some other consequences there. Return on investment is another one. Now, when we start running campaigns on Facebook, for example, or Instagram, to promote some service or to promote our brand or whatever, do we actually know if we spend 5,000 ringgit on a campaign, can we measure what we got back? Did we get back 15,000 ringgit or did we get back 50 ringgit? What is the return on investment? Because the idea is not just to run campaigns. There needs to be some sort of a measurable outcome. This is more of a financial risk. Nevertheless, it happens through digital medium, so we need to be aware of these things. Privacy. As I said, GDPR from EU-based legislation is very draconian. And here you can see you don't need to be a European company. So the the data protection regulator in France has issued a 50 million euro fine to Google, who is based in the States. Then there was another case with a Canadian company for 10 million Canadian dollars. So actually, it's possible to be fined some significant amounts of money for not actually dealing a lot on data privacy. Now, some regulations actually can be even worse because there can be some criminal charges for board members. There was one like that in UK a few years ago. There were actually criminal charges if data privacy for board directors if data privacy wasn't taken into account seriously. So now we have a situation where somebody can go to jail simply because the company is not following the proper data privacy guidelines and legislation. So these are serious issues that companies need to manage at the moment. And as I said, do not think that just because you are not in Europe, there is no point that you don't fall under. Like, I'll take a Malaysian example. If you are Petronas, and I'm pretty sure that in Petronas there is a lot of people who work there in that building or in the company who are European citizens, because you collect data on European citizens, you need to actually be compliant with GDPR. And Petronas is just an example, but it applies to any multinational, not just Petronas. Cloud. Okay, so this is what Mike Rogers said, a former director of National Security Agency. This is the agency that sits above CIA and FBI. This is the head. Now, for those that thought that cloud was a panacea, I would say you haven't been paying attention. Cloud can bring a lot of positives, and at the same time, it creates a lot of additional problems. So here are some of the things, some of the risks that exist. This is just a subset, which I took here because there is no time here in the presentation. But there are things like, if you look at number 5, here, data ownership, governance and accountability. Who owns the data? All right. You think that because the data is yours, you should be owning it. But like if you look at Gmail terms and conditions, you don't own the data of your emails, Google does. Okay. So data governance. Now, does that organization providing the infrastructure to your organization, does the provider actually know, are they GDPR compliant? Are they compliant with the legislation in terms of data privacy, which is related to your country? Okay, these are all the things that you need to consider when you actually put your infrastructure and your information processing somewhere outside. Now, also we have things like number 4, share technology. So basically, when you go into a cloud, you're sharing the same server with a lot of other organizations. Security is pretty good. However, leakages can occur, and it's possible actually to breach and jump from one to another. Or you're already anyway in behind the perimeter because there's a firewall outside the data center, but if I'm a customer, I can go at least to the firewall. And after that, if I'm a hacker and I possess the hacking expertise, I can try and hack into the other systems which are sitting on that piece of hardware. So these are, again, risks that need to be addressed. Now, number two, insecure interface and application programming interfaces. How does data travel between your corporate network, all of those laptops and tablets that your employee use in the office, and your cloud provider? Is it encrypted? Is it secure? How does authentication happen? Is it clear text authentication? Shouldn't be, but you need to actually get a confirmation and see someone can actually explain to you. So these are some of the risks in cloud. So once you put your data and your applications out there, there is a number of points where risks, where failures can occur and risks start popping up. Anything between the system of your employee, the laptop of your employee, and the processing on the other side and back is a risk that this is not an issue in terms of it can be managed. It is managed quite well, but you need to be aware, you need to know contractually what the provider has given you, what the provider has promised. You need to be aware who is the provider. Is it a top tier provider like Google, Microsoft, and Amazon, or is it somebody totally unknown? And I'm not saying that they are bad. I'm just saying that you need to satisfy yourself that you're comfortable putting all of your data and your applications into that with that provider. So talking about cybersecurity, I just want to quickly show you something here. These are the systems which are sitting in your data center, and the little thin line around is your network perimeter. Network perimeter, think of it like this: firewalls. There's a number of other things that protect your systems. Usually, these things are sorted quite well. They are protected quite well. The risks are there, but they have been there for a long time. So there is a certain maturity in most organizations, and these are not a big problem. They can be, if they are, you just need to check that they are not, but we're all good here. Where the biggest problem, the bigger problems are the devices that access those systems from outside network. Can be laptops on the left, can be mobile devices, tablets and mobile phones, the one on the right, especially with employees working outside the office now. That is becoming an even bigger issue. So suddenly we have here devices that have the permissions to go through the network. So they have the key to the house. The question is, what can they do? Now, problems, and people do it, but again, you need to basically educate your employees that devices that access the corporate network should be managed in a different way, and they shouldn't be given to parents, to your parents on the left, or to the kids on the right, because those little kiddies which are clicking on every button which is flash and that they can think of and that they like, they can actually inadvertently click on a phishing button, and there can be a piece of software installed on that mobile device, and from that point onwards, things become totally different. Somebody can be listening to all of your traffic. Same thing with other people. So not everybody is a cybersecurity expert, and not everybody thinks that actually behind that flash button on the screen, potentially there can be a virus. People don't think in those terms. Like I know that my parents don't think in those terms. They are in their mid-80s. They just go there to read news and to talk to friends on Skype and on Facebook, that type of stuff. But potentially there is an issue there, because some of these buttons, some of those flashy titles, like Angelina Jolie getting married for the 5th time to Brad Pitt, draw people, and they are bytes. They are click bytes for people to click, and actually there's a piece of software that gets installed then on that computer. So now you need to manage the risk on the mobile devices and devices that connect to the network. How protected are they? Are they managed by the company, in which case things are not as critical, or are they personal devices and whoever the person is can install any type of software and the protection is not up there? These are just some of the things for you to consider. Now, we don't have, actually just quickly, one of these, just again, using the chat, read those 4. One of them is actually a real phishing email that was sent to me. Okay, it was sent to me. Which one do you think is that email? And we'll just give it 30 seconds. So read quickly, or 45 seconds. Read it quickly, and then answer 1, 2, 3, or 4. All, no, they are not all. Actually, there's only one. The others are. All right, so we have 60 seconds. The reason I actually put a time limit on this thing is because when we read an email, we don't spend thinking too much about it. We just usually either do whatever it says or we just delete it. So we don't usually spend 60 seconds per email. But anyway, it's number 2. That message was sent to me. And I don't know actually, because it seems quite legit. I don't know what actually made me suspicious about it. Well, I guess one of the things is the fact that I'm running courses on cybersecurity, so my levels of suspicion are a little bit above the normal. But it is number 2. And this is what you are dealing with. So this is the thing that actually can be sent to your organization. Now the question is, when somebody sends an email like that, how many people will not click on what, because it says click here to get more information, that was at the bottom. How many people will not click on it? And by clicking on it, that means that they have opened the door and some sort of malware can be installed, and from that eventually the network, the organizational environment will be penetrated. So here's just an example of what we're dealing with. The last one is digital disruption. This is a more an organizational level, but just some quick examples, because potentially the business model will be threatened, or potentially the whole organization can be threatened. And these are some really quite extreme examples. But when you think about photo cameras, this is a nice photo camera here, a nice Fuji one. How many people these days are using a photo camera versus a mobile phone? Mobile phones turned us all into semi-professional or almost professional photographers. I've read actually interviews with photojournalists who said that they're using mobile phones sometimes because I don't want to lug a camera. And I have a camera like the one at the top that I haven't used in 6 or 7 years, simply because the mobile phone now, in terms of capabilities, provides much more. So now all of these manufacturers are totally disrupted, so they have a lot of new issues. They still exist, but there are some things, some actually that are almost gone. Woolworths, this is one of the two main supermarket chains in Australia. It is a supermarket. Veggies, meat, milk, and so on and so on. And now they branched into financial services. They are issuing credit cards. So suddenly the supermarket is starting to competing with the banks and starting to eat into their revenue, right? And now the supermarket actually has got a loyalty program with a lot of names on that loyalty program, and they can compete very seriously with the banks because they have access to a much bigger customer base. Everybody goes to the supermarket. Not everybody goes to the banks. In Australia, there are 6 big banks and 2 second-tier ones. So basically, the market is split between 8 players, but the groceries market is split between 2 players. So each one of these organizations has got a huge customer list where they can start competing with the banks. And the last one is taxi. Okay, taxis, yep, all good. And now we have Grab, who is competing with the taxis. Last time when I was in Malaysia in 2019, I remember that actually there were taxis who were working as Grabs. So there was some sort of a agreement between Grab and I forgot which taxi company, but I ordered a Grab and actually it was a taxi that came, one of those red and white taxis. And initially I thought, well, what's happening? I asked the driver, he said, don't worry. Actually, this is part of Grab now. So all of these things are completely changing the industry. They can actually change your industry, can disrupt your business. So you need to keep that in mind because there are new players where technology makes it easier. It's lowering the barriers to entry. So just a quick example on social media risks, how to audit it. So the first step, need to review the organizational chart. What is the scope of the audit? Okay, are we looking at the public relations risk? Are we looking at the operational effectiveness in terms of financial risks? Are we spending the right amount of money for the return that we're getting back? So all of these campaigns that we're running, are they good? Or do they bring value for money, or they are a complete waste of time and money? So then who is responsible for social media? Is there somebody who is responsible, or is it just sitting somewhere in the universe and nobody is actually taking responsibility for that? Social media professionals, is there somebody reporting to the responsible manager who actually is dealing with that on a regular basis? Doesn't need to be a full-time employee, but not like in an ad hoc way. Today Mario will put a post and tomorrow John will put a post, and next week City will put a post, and so on. Is there somebody who is actually doing it on a regular basis and has got the skills? How many platforms do we have? Do we have one like Facebook or Instagram? Or are we present on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, you name it? And if there is not a map, just create a map so that you can get an idea what the organization is doing. Review, approval, and publishing process. Who is approving and how is the whole process happening? What is the frequency of our posts and what are we putting there? Who is responsible actually to read these things and to say, yes, this can go, or no, potentially this can contravene whatever legislation or create compliance issue, or it can be a reputational risk. Who is responsible to actually review every post before it goes out, if there is anybody like that? Are we using automated tools? Possibly, they are quite easy to use, they are quite powerful, but the issue with them is that if we are using automated tools, that means that sometimes we run the risk of actually running a campaign. Let's say we are launching a new product on the 1st of May. We set an automated campaign, it's spitting out posts and ads and whatever, and somebody set it to the 1st of June. They just made a mistake. So now the product will launch on the 1st of May. We want the campaign to finish then, but it will run for another month, which is a waste of money because we don't care anymore. We're doing some other marketing activities in relation to that. So those automated tools need to be reviewed. Sometimes they are free, but they can still be spitting content which is not relevant anymore, and they just cause reputational damage in this way. So review monitoring processes. What is the monitoring process? Does it exist? Is it present at all? Or there is no monitoring? Does anybody actually have a look on a monthly basis or quarterly basis or fortnightly basis to see what's happening on social media? Whoever the responsible manager is needs to be aware of that. So this is just a very high-level plan of an example of how you can audit actually the social media risks. Before we continue, I just want to show you actually a quick demo of a fraud detection system. This is a real system. This is working actually. This is financial risks. I will just share my screen now. This is something that I had developed. This is something that I have developed as part of my PhD research in synthetic identity fraud. This is a system that actually looks through the behavior of a potential credit applicant for online credit. So they look at their Twitter activity. They look here at the top, the second orange square, Twitter followers acquisition. Then they look at Facebook friends, then Facebook activities. They analyze the answers, topic classification. So there are questions saying, what are you going to do with the money? What would happen if you lose your job and you cannot repay? So the system actually analyzes all of that. And once the analysis is finished, I'll just run the system here. Okay. So now, after that, it will actually provide, it will run everything and it will provide information. It provides two types of information. The first one is something which is designed for human consumption, like this thing here, which says, okay, Facebook activity is green, it's all good. Facebook friends, all good. Topic answer, this person hasn't answered the way they should. For whatever reason, we need to review. Twitter activity is suspicious. Yellow, we need to have a look at something, and Twitter followers are good. So this is one of the outputs that it provides. The second one actually it provides, if you look here, it's just one single figure, 0 or 1, but it allows the system to be linked to other enterprise systems to become part of the fraud detection processes within a company automatically. So that there is no need for human intervention. It can just go and have a look what's going. The systems can take automatically an action. This is what if people need to have a look and dig deeper, this is what the system provides. This is the Facebook activity. These are my own accounts. Here, top left corner, Facebook activity. You can see that there are 3 years which are red: 2013, 2014, 2011. That goes below a certain threshold. I haven't done much. Facebook friends acquisition in 2010 and 2011. I didn't have too many friends. I had more after that. Probably that was the start of my Facebook. Twitter activity. This is just a separate account that I have on Twitter. Haven't done much, just only 1 year. And in 2020, nothing. It's red. And this is my Twitter friends from a different account where everything seems to be okay here in the bottom right corner. So this is just an example that I wanted to share with you to show you how technology can be used to mitigate one of the big digital risks at the moment, which is the synthetic identity fraud. It will be a bigger and bigger issue as we are relying more and more on digital technology to verify our identities, to verify new customers, and so on and so on. So this is the end of our session. Just quickly before we go, I would like to mention something. This session is based on our digital risk course, which is a micro credential that's running over 5 modules. You will receive the slides and the recording of this session. So here you can see the program outline and also program overview. You can see in each one of the modules what we are covering and what are the specific topics, because we just scratched the surface today. It's just in 1 hour. It's not easy to do much more than that. This whole course is 5 modules of 4 hours, so it's 20 hours altogether. So please have a look, and if you are interested, let us know. For those of you who are based in Malaysia, we are an HRD Corp, the old HRDF. We are registered with HRD Corp, and this course specifically is HRD Corp claimable. So if your organization is registered with HRD Corp, you can get full credit for attending the course. So with that, thank you very much. It was great to have you here. Please, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat box.